lately I've been hearing a lot, like it's just been a thing for like the past like 2-3 years, is the A side B side situation. I want to make something clear on this channel, uh for the listeners, is a side fighter is that of it depends on the revenue you bring in. So a Pacquiao, a Mayweather, a Oscar de la Hoya, these are A side fighters. Right now, Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford, to me, is about, it might be a mega fight because it's a fan, the fans want this fight. But as far as views goes, it might do a little bit better than when Sean Porter in his prime fought Keith Thurman in his prime. So what I'm saying is, these guys are acting like superstars when there's a long way to go, to me. Like, for instance, like Floyd Mayweather had fought 3-4 difficult champions before he ever even got to De La Hoya. As far as Crawford and Spence goes, there's only about 2 guys on their whole resume, 2 real difficult championship quality opponents on both their resumes. And to me, neither of them have ever broke 1 million pay-per-views. And you're gonna 80-20 somebody. Like, that just drives me nuts, and it's killing the sport of boxing.
I couldn't agree with you more, man. I couldn't agree with you more. Like, these dudes really feel like, they're Floyd Mayweather and they're Manny Pacquiao. And I was talking about that a little earlier on the show, how like because I argue in the comment section all the time on YouTube, man. And one of the arguments that always comes up is, so Bud is willing to take 80-20 versus Pacquiao, but he can't take 60-40 versus Earl. Yes. You know what I'm saying? Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, Errol Spence, you can't even mention Manny Pacquiao in the same breath as Errol Spence. Like, as far as marketability, as far as fan base, as far as money, as far as accolades, you know what I'm saying? Like, us as boxing fans, like, we know Earl's the tougher fight, hands down. We know that. But we're talking about all the shit that you Earl niggas like to talk about. Fan bases and monies and splits and all that bullshit. We talking about that shit. You know what I'm saying? Here's why Earl isn't Manny. Manny, more credibility among the casuals, as stiffer competition among the casuals, more money, even with a lower split. Pacquiao offers the better financial reward. 2, 3, less risky. Manny Pacquiao hasn't knocked anyone out and God knows how motherfucking long. Okay? He hasn't knocked anyone out. Number 3. Okay? And number 4, more eyes. The fan base is there. Fighters go after the biggest fights not just because of the money. They go after the biggest fights because it's an opportunity to grow their fan base with the more eyes that are on them. Period. So what are the Arab people talking about with this shit? You know what I'm saying? It's really quite crazy. And honestly, I think a Manny Pacquiao could probably do 1 million pay-per-view buys. As soon as word comes out that Manny Pacquiao is fighting an undefeated 3-weight division champion, I think that pay-per-view will do those kind of numbers. 1, because Pacquiao has done way more than 1 million pay-per-view buys in the past. 2, because Manny Pacquiao has, even fighting nobodies like Jeff Horn, can still generate 5 to maybe 600,000 pay-per-view buys. So with that logic alone, it's safe to assume that Manny Pacquiao and Terrence Crawford will do probably at least 800, 900,000 pay-per-view buys. But an Earl in a Terrence fight does nowhere near those numbers. A Earl and a Terrence fight maybe does 400,000 pay-per-view buys because none of them have ever cracked 300. None of them have ever cracked 400,000 pay-per-view buys. None of them have ever done that before in the past. So for them to do 400 or even 500,000 pay-per-view buys is a big step for both fighters. But it would be unrealistically ambitious for anybody to think that Bud versus Earl would do anywhere close to 1 million pay-per-view buys. It's just not realistic. But at the end of the day, the casuals are the people who are paying for the fucking pay-per-views. And if they see a Manny Pacquiao pay-per-view up against a Errol Spence pay-per-view, guess which one they're going to be buying? The Manny Pacquiao pay-per-view. You know what I'm saying? And they're going to recognize that name, and Terrence is going to get more credit for beating somebody like a Manny Pacquiao than he would be for beating somebody like a Errol Spence. It's just an overall better deal for Bud Crawford, thus making him willing to kind of take, you know what I mean, a lesser split. You know,
no doubt.
It's even a less risk. Like Manny Pacquiao's not as risky of an opponent as an Errol Spence. You know what I'm saying? So it's like it's a win-win-win-win all across the board.